Hi, welcome back to Grains in Small Places, and today we're going to be making something with my pizza dough recipe. So I know that a lot of you really like that pizza dough recipe. We do too. I totally agree with you there, but I have a few recipes of things that you can make with the pizza dough. So I wanted to go ahead and make a garlic cheesy pull apart bread with my pizza dough. So let's get started. So for this garlic cheesy pull apart bread, I thought it might be fun to use some of the things that we got in our Azure order that I was going over. So this is the A2 heavy cream. So I'm gonna start with this, putting it in my mixer. This is kind of a first for me, so we'll see how this goes. Gonna turn it on and just start whipping the heavy cream. Okay, so we're at about the 4-minute mark and we have some nice, lovely whipped cream. So to make butter, we need to take it past the whipped cream stage. So I'm gonna go ahead and keep on going. Okay, so now we've taken it past the whipped cream and we've got butter. But what I'm gonna do is, because it's not all completely mixed throughout, I still have some whipped cream on my scraper. I'm just going to take and scrape everything down and then run it one more time. Now this will be unsalted butter, so it won't taste exactly like your traditional butter unless you add salt to it. So you can see the liquid's already wanting to separate, which is perfect because we're going to end up kind of straining and squeezing that liquid out. Okay, just get it all off of here so I can run it one more time. All right. Forgot to get it out of the middle. All right, perfect. So you can see how we've got that separating. Okay, I'm gonna set my ball and scraper to the side. I'm gonna rinse those off so that I can finish, or so I can start making the dough. But you can see this did a really nice job wanting to separate the solids from the liquids. So I'm just going to scoop out the solids and leave the liquids in there. So if you're going to be using this butter right away, you don't really need to, squeeze it through a cheesecloth or anything like that. But if you're wanting a longer term storage, you're going to need to make sure that you rinse all of the liquids off of here. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and I'll probably just rinse it and squeeze it out one time. But since I'm using it right away, I'm not going to fuss too much with having to, continue to rinse it a few times. But that is nice. You can see as I squeeze it, more liquid even wants to come out. So I might as well strain some of that out. So I'm just gonna rinse it and squeeze it, rinse it and squeeze it, and then I'll have a nice, beautiful, fresh homemade butter. For our compound butter, Matt is gonna just kind of mince up some fresh garlic. I used about 3 or 4 cloves. You can do this to desired how much garlicky you want. And then we're just gonna chop up some fresh herbs like parsley and put that into the butter to make a compound butter. Okay, so technically that liquid that we had left behind is called buttermilk, so you could save that to make pancakes or any of those other recipes. Okay, so to this butter now, you can see now I can make it nice and smooth. Oh, I still got a little bit of liquid left. So for long-term storage, you're just gonna wanna squeeze the liquid out of this and rinse it a few times until the liquid runs out kind of clear. So as I'm messing and working around with this, I'm still getting a little bit of liquid out. So I'm just gonna, and if you don't want to make the butter from scratch, that's perfectly fine. You can just use any softened butter. I just really thought this would be a fun project to do together. Okay, so I'm gonna take a pretty heavy pinch of my Redmond's real salt that we got from the Azure pickup also, and I'm gonna put that in there to make a salted butter. And then I'm also going to put this garlic and parsley that Matt so kindly chopped up for us into here. And I'm gonna just kind of cut that and stir that in so that it can start seasoning and flavoring the butter as we make our dough. This smells amazing. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and set this to the side and we'll go ahead and get started on the dough. Okay, so I'm not gonna get into the nitty-gritty details of making the dough for this all the way from the beginning. So if you've been following me for a while, you've probably already seen me do it 100 times. So if you are new to making dough, I do have a video on making pizza dough, but I also would recommend watching my focaccia video. That's where I go into the details. It's kind of like one of my master classes to getting the pizza dough just right and the texture and consistency that you're looking for. So I'm gonna go ahead and just weigh out my wheat berries. Today I'm doing a double batch because I wanna go ahead and get this garlic cheesy pull-apart bread, but I also wanna have dough to put in my refrigerator to make pizza later this week. I'm gonna be using a little bit of kamut and a lot of it of my hard white wheat. That's my favorite combination. I'll make sure to put a link in the description box below to my mixer, my mill, these grain bins, anything, because I get a lot of questions asked about that. So I'll put those down in the description box below. I'll also make sure to put a link to the recipe in the description box below. So I'm gonna go ahead and weigh out my wheat berries, which will give me the weight of flour that I need. I'm gonna mill it in my mill and then I'll have nice fine flour. Right now I'm using my Nutrimill Harvest grain mill. I have a coupon code if you're interested. It's in the description box below, and you can grab $20 off at the Nutrimill Bosch website on any of their mixers and mills. So while your mill is milling, you can go ahead and measure out your water. I'm gonna go ahead and put my water in. I'm gonna go ahead and put in my honey. And my olive oil. And my salt. I'm gonna give this a mix, and because I'm using my GISP method, which I will put a link to that post in the description box below to explain what that is, I'm gonna go ahead and put everything in except for the yeast, and we'll let it start mixing together, and that would be considered my autolyse period. And what that does is allow the fresh milled flour to start absorbing that liquid and the bran to start softening so it doesn't interfere with our kneading process. And now our freshly milled flour is all milled and ready to go. I'm just gonna put this in my mixer. So now we've got everything in here except for the yeast. Pull this away from the side as I start it. That way it doesn't climb up on me. So if you get like that where it starts climbing all the way up, that means you need to pull this away from the side. And for me, this is looking a little bit dry. I don't know if it's a little drier today than normal, but dough is drier than I'd like to see. So I'm actually gonna add just a little bit more water into here. Not a lot. But if the dough appears to be dry at the beginning before the autolyse, then you know you're going to have an issue with it being dry after the autolyse. And if it's dry dough, then it will never knead into that nice stretchy dough that we're looking for. So let me go ahead and mix that water in. So in that GISP method that I was talking about, I do mention the dry dough, that it is much more difficult to get that stretchy, light, fluffy bread. And I find that's one of the biggest problems people have with fresh milled flour is they put too much flour in their dough. But this is much nicer looking. I'm not looking for a stretch or anything like that right now. I just want to make sure that my dough is going to be able to be hydrated without being a single ball. If I have just a ball of dough at the very beginning with fresh milled flour like you would normally try to do with white flour, you're going to have too dry of dough. So what I'm going to do is let this sit and autolyse for about 15 minutes before we put in our yeast. That way we don't activate our yeast prematurely and exhaust all of its efforts to do its work. So I'm going to just set this on here. And this is my little trick to remembering to put my yeast in later. So I'm going to come back after 15 minutes, we'll put that yeast in, and then we'll start the kneading process. So everything I've done before is just mixing. I haven't started kneading yet. So we'll be back in about 15 minutes. Okay, so now that that rest period is up, I can go ahead and put in the yeast and start that kneading process. All right, and we'll go ahead and get it started. I'll bring you back when it's all ready. Okay, so this actually took me a lot less time than what it's been taking me in the past, but you can see the dough's nice and stretchy. Even if I try to get a window pane, sure, it might break just a little bit. Don't focus too much on getting that perfect thin one. When you do get it, it's kind of amazing and awesome. But I don't always get the perfect window pane every time I'm making bread. But what I'm looking for is to get my hands in the dough and feel when I pull this hunk of dough, it wants to stay together. It doesn't want to just fall apart. So this is nice, stretchy, and ready to go. I've been really happy. This is made with the hard white wheat and the kamut from that Azure Standard order that I picked up, and I made that video on back in, I think the video was posted a few weeks ago now. So all that to say is every time you get a new batch of wheat berries, it might be a little bit different than what you're used to working with. So I had a failed batch dough from me because I just kind of put it on my Ank for 12 minutes and walked away, and I over kneaded my dough. So that doesn't happen all the time, but since I got a new batch of wheat berries, that just happened because I wasn't used to it. I had been working with my old wheat for a long time, and this one ended up kneading up in 8 minutes for me, nice and beautifully. So what I'm gonna do is just spray this with some oil, cover this, and let it sit for an hour to rise. I want it to rise till double. If it's cold in your house, you may need to let it rise a little bit longer than that. Cover this and let it sit for an hour, and then I'll be back to show you how to turn it into the pull-apart garlic cheesy bread. And this is that really lovely, beautiful cheese that we got from that Azure haul also. I guess this is just like Azure haul day. Use what we got from there. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and use the mozzarella. And I'm going to shred this. Anytime you're using shredded cheese for like a recipe, I always recommend to shred your own. It just takes a couple extra minutes, and if you have any tools, it takes less time than that. But the flavor is just intensified and so much better. And also you don't have to worry about the anti-caking agents that they add to the cheeses when you buy the pre-shredded cheeses. So I'm just going to shred this whole 8-ounce block, and then we're going to use that in our pull-apart bread. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and set this to the side and wait until we are ready to fill our pull-apart bread, which is the exciting part. I'll be back. Okay, so since I doubled this recipe so I could have some pizza dough for later on, I'm gonna go ahead and divide my dough into 4 pieces. Get my little bench scraper oiled up so it doesn't stick. And then I'm gonna put a little bit of olive oil in each one of these freezer bags. And then they can go straight into the fridge or straight into the freezer. Sometimes when I'm making pizza dough, I don't even worry with the first rise. I just put them straight into these bags and put them in the fridge and then wait a few days and then let the dough come up to room temperature. And then that's how I will do my pizza dough. But since I went ahead and had these rise for this particular bread recipe, I decided not to overcomplicate things and go ahead and let my pizza dough do a first rise. So, okay. So I definitely need to oil the inside of these bags so that my dough doesn't stick in here. And then also, another thing about that is you want to make sure you don't put all the dough into one of those bags because it will kind of come out and break the bag open. And I've had it actually break my bags before. So we don't want that. All right, so here is our dough. It's nice and doubled. Hope you can see that. Almost halfway up the thing here. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and just consolidate all of this and put it down here on my work surface. Try not to bang onto the microphone too much. By the way, how are you guys liking my new microphone? Hopefully it's helpful with my audio. I know my audio in the past has been a little bit difficult. Thank you all for bearing with me and still supporting me even though my audio wasn't great. And I know my lighting isn't great either, so that may be something in the future that I'm able to fix. But right now, this is what we got to work with. I have this little tiny RV space, and then I've got, you know, my tripod with my camera, and then my family lives here. We actually do live here. So adding lights to the whole mix made it just impossible to be able to maneuver around. So I'm a big proponent, and you kind of, you know, live with what you got and make the best of it. Okay, so I'm gonna take 2 of these dough balls. This will actually probably make me either 4, these 2 dough balls will make me 4 small pizzas, 2 large pizzas, or 3 medium-sized pizzas. So I put those in there, I'll zip the bags closed, and those will go right into my fridge. And really no need for them to rise or anything. So I'm making 2 loaves of this pull-apart bread. So what I want to do is kind of just smash this out into a rectangle, almost as if you were making cinnamon rolls. So let's see if I can do that. And I like to oil my surface and my hands so that there's no sticking. I prefer oil over flour, that way I don't have any issues with my dough getting too dry. Okay, I want to try to make it as rectangular as possible because what I'm going to do is cut these into like rectangles and then we're going to stack them. I'll show you here in a moment and put those into my bread pan. So you can use a rolling pin if you want here. I just really like to work with my hands. Okay, so I'm actually going to prepare my bread tins. These are little 4x8 bread pans. I need to move you for a moment to get my parchment paper out. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and line these with my parchment paper. My husband taught me this little trick. It works pretty well. Just kind of slide one into the other. And then turn around and do the same for the other one. Okay, so as I was saying, these are 2 smaller 4x8 bread pans. If you have a really large 9x5 pan, one of these recipes will probably fill your 1 pan. You could probably even make this as a monkey bread style, which I do have a dessert cinnamon monkey bread recipe. which I will try to remember to put a link to that also in case you're interested in making different kinds of pull-apart breads. But if you're looking, you could also make that in like a bundt pan style. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is we're going to take our garlic herb butter that we made, and I'm gonna use about a third of this on here. Or maybe a little more than a third, but I want to leave just a little bit to brush the top of my loaf with. And since we've got 2 loaves to do. So I know that I said I'm doubling this recipe so that I could make pizza dough, but in the recipe that I'm going to put on my blog, I'm going to just put this one recipe. And so the written recipe will just be for these 2 loaves. So if you're wanting to also make, you know, pizza dough for another day or focaccia or whatever you want to make with the rest of the pizza dough, you could double the recipe as well. But I didn't want any confusion to think that if you make one batch of this that you're going to, you know, split it into 4 pieces. So sometimes, I'm sorry, sometimes there's confusion between my videos and written recipes. So I wanted to clarify that. Okay, so we got the butter in there. I'm going to set this back. And then I've got my freshly shredded mozzarella cheese. This is an 8-ounce block. I'm going to use half of this on here because I want this really nice and cheesy. So I'm going to try to fill this with about half. So I know I said it's going to be kind of like a cinnamon roll, but we're not going to be rolling this up like a cinnamon roll, but the application kind of looks similar. Okay, that's probably about half. So I'm going to just spread this out evenly and then just kind of push it down because I want these toppings to stay. Oh, I'm so excited for this. This smells so good. Okay, so now is kind of the fun part. Now I'm going to just take this and divide in half. And divide in half this way. These ones really don't matter if they're accurately perfect because we're just going to be stacking them and they're going to go into our tray here. Okay, so then I think I'm going to do, I'm thinking about, this is about 4 inches. I'll probably do half and then half. That way they fit into my tray. Okay. All right, then I'm just going to literally take these and stack them. And the good news is this is a nice stretchy dough, so if they're not exactly the same size, I was able to stretch out below. Okay. Maybe I needed to cut these in half one more time. I do need to allow for rising, and I forgot to account for that. So what I'm going to do is put these in my pan, kind of give them a little smash down here. It's okay if it doesn't fill your whole pan. It shouldn't fill your whole pan. We want to allow for rising here. So I'm just going to kind of push these in, and these are up and down. So they're like this rather than like this, if that makes sense. And I'm seeing a little bit of cheese all throughout, a little bit of dough, a little bit of butter. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and grab that second piece of dough. And we're going to flatten this one out the same way. And then I'm going to do the same thing, butter that. And then we'll put it with cheese. I'm just gonna save just a little bit of this butter. Yum. You know those days when you are making something that you know is gonna taste good just because it smells good and your mouth is watering like the whole time you're making it? Yep, that's me right now. Okay, I'm gonna try and take this one a little bit all the way to the edges more, because I was kind of in cinnamon roll mode, leaving that little space along the edge, but I don't think that that's entirely necessary. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put a little bit of this garlic butter on the top. Oops. And then save a little bit for the top of the other one. Okay, and now the mozzarella cheese. You could probably even do Parmesan, Asiago, an Italian blend of cheese. I mean, really whatever you think sounds good. Whatever your family likes, whatever you come up with. You could do different kinds of herbs in your garlic herb butter. Like I was saying earlier when I was making the butter, you don't have to make your own butter. You could purchase butter, no problem. Okay, so I ended up doing in half. And then these were in half. This piece of dough is a little bit bigger, but it's okay. And then I stacked all those up, and then I cut them in half again. So. Just move that out of the way. Okay. Okay. All right, stick this in, and you can layer it one at a time if you think that's easier, whatever works for you. I'm just pressing this in so it doesn't fall over while it's rising. So again, this does have a second rise, so we'll, won't worry about if it completely fills our whole pan or not. And then the rest of that butter, I'm just gonna brush on the top of this because I definitely don't want to waste it, and I think that it'll make a nice, beautiful topping for that. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and cover these, and I'm gonna let them rise for somewhere between a half an hour to an hour until they basically double. They're gonna look slightly puffy and risen. That's how I know I want to bake them. I want to make sure I don't let them rise all the way up so that they have no more oven spring, because when we bake them, they will rise a little bit longer. So I'm going to go ahead and cover these, and then I'll bring you back when we put them in the oven. We're going to preheat our oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. These are going to bake somewhere between 25 and 35 minutes depending on your oven, so just whenever the internal temperature reaches 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so these have risen. They're nice and puffy, and when I press on it, it comes up really slowly rather than popping right back up. If it pops right back up, you know that it's not ready to bake yet. Oh my goodness. Look at these. They look so good. Don't mind my croutons over there. They're just waiting for my oven, so those are gonna go in. Made those out of my brown bread recipe, which I think will be on my blog by the time this video comes out, but I'm not sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and pull these out from the parchment paper and let them cool a little bit, and then I will let you see the inside. I got a little dark on the top, but yum. That looks delicious. Thanks so much for hanging out with me while we made this delicious garlic cheesy pull-apart bread. This is my last loaf. The first loaf completely gone from dinner. It was so good. If you enjoyed this video, you can find this recipe and a whole bunch of other recipes all dedicated to fresh milled flour at grainsandsmallplaces.net. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. And thank you for stopping by Grains and Small Places. Goodbye.